Biggly Piggly Wiggly on Spring Street has served 3 generations of shoppers since 1955 as the largest locally owned independent grocery store in the area. The Joseph family owners grew up here, so you know they're invested in the community. They provide the biggest variety of choice meats, the freshest produce, an in-house deli bakery, great wine selection, and more of your favorite brands. Every purchase gives you gasoline points so you can save at our pumps. Order online for pickup at bigglypigglywiggly.com. Biggly Piggly Wiggly on Spring Street. No one beats the pig.
The opinions expressed on Scoop Squad Truth Pod are those of the hosts and the guests and not those of WVRC Media. The Scoop Squad Truth Pod, copyright 2024. Scoop Squad Truth Squad, LLC.
You're listening to the Scoop Squad Truth Pod, and I am your hostess. I'm going to start saying that. I'm the hostess. Ashley Switzer, and we are the only Charleston, West Virginia podcast that matters. And we matter because we talk about things that are relevant to you out there, Charleston and Kanawha County and surrounding counties. We talk about exactly what's going on here in Charleston, West Virginia, the capital city of the great state of West Virginia. And this is the 95th episode. We're kind of throwing around ideas of what we're going to do for the 100th episode, because that'll be super cool. We've been on the air for 2 years now. It just blows my mind, but we're picking up listeners every week. I feel like we have a variety of stories. We've got personal interest stories. We have, things related to government, things related to farming in West Virginia. I mean, you name it, we talk about it. So if you like this podcast, make sure you go to one of your favorite podcast platforms and subscribe to us. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Share us. Find us on Facebook at Scoop Squad. Are we just Scoop Squad on Facebook? Or no, we're Scoop Squad Truth Pod on Facebook, right? Yeah. So find us there. And we've got Barry Holstein in the house. And Barry and I were just talking, and I'm going to ask him in a minute, who are you? You just came into my world. I think I heard you first talk at a Kanawha County Republican Executive Committee meeting. I think you and I also were asked to meet the delegation from, was it Denmark? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what I thought. And then I find out that you run this page on Facebook called the First Sgt, right? Mm-hmm. That's your Facebook page. And I didn't connect the two. I didn't know. I knew First Sgt, but I didn't know you were the same person.
Sure.
And then I started to hear you talk, and I'm like, good grief. And then you have this whole super huge First Sgt's Guide to the West Virginia Legislature, where you actually rate legislators based on how they vote, basically. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But your daughter is at Tulsa University in law school. Right. And here is my son and his family. He's actually the wide receivers coach at Tulsa University. So
wow, it's awesome.
Yeah, so I'll have to send it to you. And if she sees Ryan around on campus, she needs to yell out.
Well, she is a poor college student, so if he wants to,
give
buy her dinner, give her gift certificates. Yeah.
His wife is really good about, just she's like me. She's a mother hen, so she wants to feed and
sure.
and mother. So I'm going to have to hook Gabby up with her. Bless her heart. So we've also got Elisa Payne. Hey, Lisa.
Hey.
Closer to your mic.
Sorry, my bad.
You have so much to say, and it's so important, and we need to be able to hear it.
Thank you.
Say it with power, with punch. Own it. So Barry, who are you? Why don't you
get to that question.
I said when I talk to you, I talk way too much, and I'm going to let you take over. Tell us who you are and how you got to be such an expert on West Virginia politics.
Sure. So to answer the question, who am I? I don't know. I think if anyone asked me, I'd probably say I'm just a citizen. Mm-hmm. I'm a citizen who cares. And I'm a citizen who has decided to do something. And doing something, I have found, is always better than doing nothing. Because even if you do something that's wrong, you'll learn from it. Maybe you won't do that again. or maybe you'll get better at it, that kind of thing. So that's how I would really describe myself. My family and I, we make fun because one of the recent news articles that mentioned me in it described me as a local activist.
Oh, really?
And I said, I really have to work on that. Local is not what I was looking for.
What were you looking for?
Regional, state activist, something,
But you like the activist.
But you like the activist
part was fine, right?
Okay.
But I felt a little discouraged. They cornered me down to the local adjunct.
And you're way beyond that. I mean, you watch the whole entire state.
Right. So if it's just a little backstory,
okay,
right, and how the whole TOPS views and First Sergeant's Guide to the West Virginia Legislature. So in my past, I did have a lot of time in the Army and in Army Reserves. When I got out of the Army, I was a First Sergeant, which is one of the higher ranks in the enlisted side in the Army. And so affectionately, if you're in the Army, people call you, and you have that rank, people call you Top. It's just an affectionate, not affectionate is probably the wrong word. It's a title of respect.
Yeah.
Right? They call you Top. So a lot of people around here, if they know I'm military or if they've been in the military, they'll just call me Top. So which I can appreciate.
That's another name for you. You got Barry, you got First Sergeant, now we got Top. No wonder I was confused.
I know, right? So, what really started this in my life was maybe it was 2007. I was in Iraq, and I was in East Baghdad. I was doing some work there, and my job, I was a civil affairs team leader, and so I was out working with local government, local businesses, just trying to get some things lined out. Because we were over there trying to.
I was going to say, at what point of the war was that?
Yeah, so this part that I'm going to talk about was it's called the surge, right? When we sent like a whole bunch of people and we said, okay, we're going to settle this all down, we're going to get things lined out, and then we're going to get out. And so I went over as part of that, and in Eastern Baghdad, my team operated pretty much the entirety of the Eastern Baghdad segment. So I got to interact with a lot of things. I saw a lot of things. And a lot of things I saw were not good. And I came home.
You mean from our side or from?
Yeah, no, from our side. I'm not going to go into the details.
Because obviously Iraq, I mean, that there's
Sure.
you could see a lot of bad stuff over there.
Right. No, I'm not going to go into the details of like combat kind of stuff.
Sure, no.
But
policy-wise?
Yeah.
Okay.
The corruptness that was occurring.
And I think some of that's coming out now. So
Right.
we're going to hear more and more about what you're talking about.
How we were spending taxpayer money, just the things that we were doing over there.
Yeah.
Outside of the kinetic operation perspective. So I come home and I think, I'm going to do something. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to get involved. Maybe I'll run for office. That seems to be a logical thing to do.
Yeah. We all think that. I did that. I lost, but, whatever.
Well, I've lost twice, so you're in good company.
Okay, cool. A bunch of losers in here.
I'm learning from you guys.
Well, maybe we'll teach you how not to lose.
That's not the most effective thing you can do, really. I mean,
You're right.
it's a great thing to do, but.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. And that's a point that I had learned maybe a little late, right? It's taken me a while. I didn't have like a mentor. I didn't have somebody I knew who was in politics. So I didn't have somebody to kind of guide me and give me some direction. So I was just, let's go down this path and see what happens. Let's go down this path. For example, first off, my very first time I ran for office, I'm working full time. I have to support my family. I'm working full time. I decide, well, if I'm going to run for office, I can't do this part-time legislature, right? I have a job.
Yeah.
They're not going to go for that. Let's see. What position is full-time? Yeah. So I'm looking at state auditor, state treasurer, secretary of state, governor, going, okay, those are full-time gigs. Let's look at those. Let's look at my skill set. Okay, I'm not a financial guy, so we'll let that go. I'm not a lawyer. We'll let that go. Secretary of state. That's it.
I can do that.
Nobody even knows what that job does.
We do now.
We do now.
And it got tougher. The job got tougher.
But back then, we didn't really know. And historically, I looked, and there wasn't a lot of people running for that office. I thought, well, let's do that. And so with very little money, I set out, and shortly after I filed to run, then Mike Warner filed to run.
Ooh.
So Mike Warner and I went head-to-head in the primary. Obviously, he won that.
Right.
But I did well. I think in the end, I want to say 37% statewide.
Wow. That's pretty darn
first
good up
time
against
go.
Mac Warner, yeah.
Right, but I mean, it took a lot of work on my side, and so I was able to reach a lot of the southern counties, not so much the north. But anyway, in the end, Mac and I got along well. You know, I supported his continued run in that effort, and you know, it was fine. But I learned a lot, and one of the things that I learned in that race got me started on this concept of scorecards and endorsements. Because I learned, one, those are important, and two, those aren't always what people think they are. You have to really think about it, right? Because as a conservative, you want to look at some of these organizations and think that they are conservative simply because they have some semblance of conservative slant to them, right?
Or the name. I'm finding that the name they pick makes you think they're altruistic, and then you find out otherwise.
Right. And I don't mean to disparage any of the organizations, right? But it's just a fact that they have a mission. Each one of those organizations has a mission.
Right.
And one of their missions is to get people elected or to get on the side of people that they think will win. So, for example, I did not receive the Right to Life endorsement. I'm not sure how you can get more right to life than I am. They endorsed Mike Warner, of course. And when I questioned them on that, in the end, it became, you know, pretty obvious. We're going to endorse those that we think are going to win. It wasn't always about your, you know, how pro-life you were.
It's just about whether or not you were going to get through, win.
Right. And I get that, right? But I had friends and family coming to me with this right to life list, and they're like, "You're not on this. I thought you were pro-life." I'm like, "Oh, I am." But that's not how these work, right? So again, I don't mean to say anything that they do great work, right? And their list is certainly invaluable. But sometimes you got to understand what you're looking at as a citizen, right? How do I read these?
Yeah.
And it can't always be just one.
Right.
Is what I found, right? I have this right to life list. It's got some great, you know, that's a great conservative issue. Does that mean everybody on that list is conservative? What we, you know, conservative people might think to be conservative? No. What it means is they hold the same position as that organization.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to change your mindset when you look at different scorecards and different endorsements and understand think about why are they endorsing them? And does it mean what I think it means? So after that experience, I really started getting involved in trying to determine then who is conservative and who's not. So I started paying attention to the legislature, you know, a couple years, started getting involved, helping other candidates. In fact, 4 years ago, I actually ran for Kanawha County School Board. But as you can imagine, a conservative running for Kanawha County School Board is challenging.
Yeah.
So again, second loss.
A real concern.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little later on in the podcast about the Kanawha County School Board. But go ahead.
Right. So 4 years ago, I decided there's a hole out there. People don't have the information that they need. The people that I know who are conservative and who want to vote conservative values don't have a quick, easy, how do I know, right? Do I really have to go look at the NRA thing and compare that to the right to life and then compare that to this one and then figure out what does this group want to do? Do I have to do all that? And so I thought there was an opportunity there for me to kind of step in the gap. And initially 4 years ago, of my own accord, I just started tracking down the bills that I felt were conservative in nature, mattered to me as a conservative, and then paying attention to
How
their vote.
people voted, right?
From that, it grew into the next year of me developing a scoring system and even providing certain weights to things, because I always say a vote is not a vote is not a vote.
Right.
Some votes are indeed more important from a conservative standpoint. So I developed a weighting system to do those votes, and so this will be the third year that I'll publish an actual report. 2 of them are already online. This will be
I've got one sitting right here.
Right.
And what's that site?
It's topsviews.com.
Yeah, we will link to it on the Facebook page. It's www.topsviews.com. And it is a very thick and very thorough guide. But I want you to tell us about the system that you came up with and what exactly we can find in this, why this report is so helpful to people like me and conservatives that vote.
Sure. So what you'll find in the report, if you look at it, it's divided into sections typically. So you may have a pro-life section, and it's going to change from legislation to legislation because they don't always deal with the same issues.
Right.
So, so one year they're dealing very heavily on school choice, which is a conservative value that we want to monitor and give credit for that. 1 year they may focus a lot on the pro-life issues, right? So from year to year it might change. But I try to put them together, and what you'll see is an explanation of the bills that are being included in their score. You will see also what I am recommending for a vote, and then sometimes it's no, right? Sometimes there are bills that I'm saying that was a no, and you'll find that some people that you think were conservative are going to vote yes, and that was one of my earliest kind of awakenings when you start thinking about, why are they voting for this? And that's when you start getting into the conversations about trading votes and all that.
I think
occurs.
that's been the most disappointing thing. And Lisa, you can chime in here too if you want. The most disappointing thing as we have watched this is probably the closest. Last year and this year is probably the closest I've watched the legislature, and of course this year is the closest for you. Yeah. I think that was a disappointing, most confusing thing.
The horse trading. I mean, that's what I'd call it. They just, we want this bill, so you've got to figure out how to get that, that passed. So we'll pass this, and then it doesn't even always happen.
Yeah,
I mean, there's some not truth telling,
and there was a lot.
Word is not their handshake.
There was a lot of definite disappointments as we closed the legislative session this past
and there
week.
were some really outstanding men and women that did a fabulous job. I've personally met so many good people. Yeah. But it's disappointing. And I think what you kind of alluded to earlier is you jump in, I think all 3 of us are kind of the person that jumps in feet first. Yeah. And kind of figures it out as you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But you jump in with this naive view of the world or the naive view of politics. And it's so disappointing when you kind of swim in those waters for a while, because you realize that what you thought isn't necessarily the reality of what's going on.
Correct. And I hope what I'm putting forward is something that's easy for folks to digest, to look at. Yes. It's typically very visual. Yes. When there's bad things going on, it'll show up as red. When there's good things, it shows up as green. Yeah. So it makes it very visual. And then for each of those bills in those categories, I show you what, every delegate, every senator, how they voted on those things, so that you can then, and my goal is really to create a conversation. Right. Because it's not up to me to determine what the delegate from Eastern Panhandle is doing. It's up for his constituents to make those determinations. Right.
Yeah, because ultimately that's who they're representing. They voted for this person to represent them.
Yeah, there was a situation in the legislature this year where I can't remember the delegate's name, but I think she was from the Eastern Panhandle. She voted. She was the only. She was the only Republican.
Northern Panhandle.
The Northern Panhandle. Yeah. She's the only Republican that voted against.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, Yeah. So, okay. So let's take a break. It's a good time for a break, and we'll come back and pick up this conversation.
Can I say one thing before the break?
No.
We have wonderful sponsors.
Yeah, we got one sitting here.
Well, I know. We neglected to mention that Elisa owns a business, and it's called Eggplant on Bridge Road.
Have you been there, Barry?
And that's where I get...
Oh, you got to go.
For men, it's the best place to get, like, shaving. I mean, like, not only beard conditioner, but shaving creams, body wash, face wash. I mean, I don't look this good, using Ivory soap. Everything that Elisa does is what keeps me looking good and having a face for radio.
Plus, we gift wrap men.
She gift wrap. So
I know, and
Barry.
I'm still trying to get the tape off of my kneecap.
She said she gift wraps men.
Yeah,
I think she meant a comma in there or something.
Men, she gift wraps, but also we want to
I
thank.
want a gift wrapped man.
You've got one.
I do.
You can't take him back.
That's right. No returns.
So also Jody's Mobile Services, excellent cleaning, pressure washing for commercial buildings, for fleet vehicles, even for residential. And he's at 304-437-3164. Also want to thank Biggly Piggly Wiggly on Spring Street. Great local grocery store owned by a local family, the Joseph family. Also by Integrity Insurance at 16 Capitol Street. Great place for homeowners insurance, business insurance, life, health, but pet insurance also. Pets get sick and it can be expensive. It's a good way to take care and anticipate those expenses. And I'm also leaving out T Graphics over on Buchanan Street. She does embroidery and other for business wear for not only T-shirts but uniforms. The polo shirts is the word I'm trying to think of. So if you appreciate this podcast, please become a patron of our sponsors as well.
You are losing your voice, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going to leave the rest of it to you guys.
It's allergy season. Yeah, so Barry, you got a wife, you got a daughter, you need to go shopping, go see Elisa at Eggplant. She can hook you up. All right, we're going to take a break, and we will come back for the second scoop of the Scoop Squad Truth Pod in a minute.
The Scoop Squad Truth Pod would like to thank our sponsors. Those include Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, featuring auto, home, life, business, workers' compensation, and pet insurance. Pet insurance, you say? That's health insurance for your dogs or cats that covers special foods, illnesses, surgeries, and medication. They're on 16 Capitol Street in Charleston at 346-9181, or reach them at www.iigwv.com. Also by Jody's Mobile Services, offering steam cleaning, pressure washing, fleet washing, and auto detailing. We come to you. They're at 304-437-3164. And also by Eggplant on Bridge Road. Anything but ordinary. Go to eggplantshop.com. Also by T Graphics on the west side, 312 Buchanan Street, 345-4816. Go to tgraphics.com for screen printing and embroidery since 1984. Again at 345-4816.
And we're back with the second scoop of the Scoop Squad Truth Pod. And we are talking with Barry Holstein, a.k.a. First Sgt, a.k.a. Tops, who has created a legislative scorecard so that you can know if the candidate that you're voting for truly is a conservative, right?
Right.
So we were just talking about, remind me of the legislator's name in the Northern Panhandle. She was the only Republican that voted against...
Delegate Wisenreed.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I've met her. Mm-hmm. Lovely lady. Mm-hmm. But she was the loner, and she, I asked her about that, and she's like, that's my district. Like they elected me. I have to vote how they
and good for her.
expect
I
me
mean,
to
honestly,
vote.
that is her district, and they do have a transgender individual on their city council.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is an issue for them. And
I mean, do you have a problem with that, Barry?
So, one of the things I've learned, there's two schools of thoughts relative to being a delegate or being a representative, right? Mm-hmm. One is you are there and you purely push the buttons that you think your members want you to push.
Fellow members or constituents?
The constituents.
Okay.
Right. The other is, if I run for office, I'm going to tell you what my values are. I'm going to be very clear about that. And if you elect me, what you're electing is for me to go up there and to vote my values. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's two different schools of thought with that I have found. And in some cases, like Delegate Wisenreed, she says that her job is to be there and to represent her constituents. So she's in that school of thought. And you're exactly right. She did that. She did it many times, but I will tell you, not to give away the upcoming edition from this year, it will score very low on my scorecard because of that, because the things that she is voting for are not in alignment with a conservative values. Mm-hmm. Right.
So let's better that out then. But her county or her district is not conservative.
That's right.
And so you think then the R beside her name is just a means to get voted in, get elected?
It would seem,
because that's not
the delegate she replaced was also
she was
at
appointed,
the bottom
right?
of my list. Yeah, Winston Reed was appointed.
Okay,
so this will be her first time
running for election.
She was appointed, which makes it, to me, kind of changes the thought process, because that means that in order to be appointed, as you know, we have to have the local county executive committee has to go through the interview process, has to recommend, and then the governor has to make the appointment.
Right.
So she made it through all those steps, but then again, her votes do not represent what I would consider conservative values.
That's so interesting, because if she's a true Republican and she's a conservative and she voted conservatively, which, I mean, she's not going to she won't get reelected.
She won't get reelected in that district.
If she's saying, if she's espousing the Republican ideals.
Right.
Or the conservative ideals. Right. And what, I'm kind of understanding is, and that's what the executive committee should have fettered out. I mean, they know what clearly that's their committee. They should be embracing conservative ideals. So
another twist.
Well, it should be.
Yeah, another
but see, that's kind of the point that we're learning, right?
Right.
Should be.
That
and this becomes a conversation. It's a broader conversation for me that I've been having. Is how many R's do we need?
Yeah.
Right?
For real.
How many do we need? At some point, how many do we really need?
Yeah, because we got an awful lot.
And right, but they're not conservative, right? So we're losing that idea that conservatives and Republican is one and the same thing. And we're losing that.
Well, I think, don't you think, though, that most conservatives understand that people are using the R just to, look at Doug Scaff.
Right.
We can throw out, we can look at people in our national Congress that are doing the same thing. These people don't vote conservative. They blocked America First and conservative legislation, voted with the Democrats. Our own Shelley Moore Capito has been working with Democrats on legislation. She admits it, puts it in writing. It's in news articles. So what we need to do as conservatives, which is why I believe that you have, what is useful about your document is we can fetter out who those true conservative values represent.
So then as a group, do we go to the Northern Panhandle, or do we go in Kanawha County, and do we then throw all of our support, behind But behind the true conservative, do you know what I'm saying? Because I'm thinking I'm just thinking here, because certain areas of our city and county are much more liberal than conservative, right? But we've got Republican representation in the Capitol. Okay,
yeah, and it cracks me up because you read all these news articles and they're like the abundantly Republican, the overwhelming Republican Congress. It's like, stop it right now.
Yeah, because I mean, if we have that much support, I feel like some of these bills that we were disappointed didn't get through would have gotten through.
Right. And I always like to say, I would rather have 51 conservatives in the House than 100 Republicans.
Yeah, agree. That makes sense.
Give me a majority of conservatives. And honestly, that's my slant with this report, right? Is to give people those opportunities. And I think you hit upon a good one. Where are we as conservatives spending our money? We typically, if we donate to campaigns, we typically want to stay local, but that might not be the best thing to do if you indeed want to get some of these conservative issues passed, right? So
what would be a better thing to do?
Well, so if we look at the races in the primary, because right now I don't think anybody is disputing the fact that the Republican primary is where it is, right? That's where it's going to happen.
That's where it's going to happen, yeah.
So once that's over, we're just all going to move forward, and we know how it's going to play out. So the fight, if you will, is in the Republican primary. There are some races that we need to look at, right, and say, where should I spend my money? If we're going to spend our money, where should it be, right? Sometimes, we may have someone who is a Republican but is not conservative, but there's nobody running against them,
right?
So your goal is not to spend money in that rate, or with that, and in some cases, maybe don't even focus on that person because you're not going to change the outcome.
Right.
Where do you want to spend your energy? Where do you want to spend your money? And look at the races where there is a conservative running against a non-conservative
in the primary,
and focus there. Focus your resources. Focus your door knocking. Focus, some other things.
And we
have one in Kanawha County coming up, by the way.
What is? Which tell us about it.
On my scorecard, I'll just tell you. Yeah. Chris Pritt has decided to leave the House. Chris scores exceptionally high on my scorecard. Typically, he's a solid conservative guy, and he's decided to run a Senate campaign against Senator Eric Nelson, which is it's a tough battle. Senator Nelson's been there for a while. But if you look at my scorecard historically, you'll find that Chris Pritt is certainly the more conservative of the two. So, if you want to have an opportunity to influence that in a conservative way, then look at those kind of races, right? And look at my scorecard and say, okay, here are these two people. They're running against each other. They actually have a record.
Yeah.
Let's look at them and make a choice and to go out and help and support whichever of those candidates that you feel is most appropriate.
And I think what you were talking about earlier, this may not be in your voting area, your district, your area.
Right.
But it impacts you.
Absolutely. At the State House.
In the wheeling and dealing part of it impacts you.
Yep.
In the voting part, it impacts you. I didn't just go talk to my senator or my delegate. I talked to every delegate I could get my hands on, left material for every delegate, emailed every delegate because they impact me as a resident of the state. So it is, and like you were saying before, there's some, I have a nice affinity for Brian Ward. He seems like a really nice guy, but he's running unopposed. So if you live in his district, what's around you? Monongalia, Marion, what's around you that you can affect a change because that is going to affect you.
Yeah.
Correct. And you're absolutely right because I will, for example, my delegate is running unopposed. I will spend zero time or effort relative to my delegate and my district. I will be door knocking. I will be doing some other things in some other areas around me. So I think it's a great point.
Do you also scorecard our senators for the national level?
No, I just do delegates and senators for state level.
We had talked before, and if I'm preempting anything, you said when you did the scorecard, there were some things you couldn't factor in, like people blocking legislation. Can you explain some of those factors?
Yeah, so there are a few factors that are hard to capture in a scorecard like this, and to get out the real picture, right? And I think today, even shortly, hopefully we're going to dive into maybe some of these. But for example, you will find that a lot of good bills that we'll probably talk about here in a minute.
Yeah, let's do it.
A lot of good bills will die in committee.
Yeah.
Now, how do you capture that when it just sits there, right? I can't score that.
You can't score it.
There was no votes. How do I score the fact that...
But there was definitely somebody behind that.
There was somebody behind that.
Bodies.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. I try to go at this with, I use the word noble intent a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got to kind of keep that in my head. And I don't try to place value judgments on actions when I don't truly know what the reason is, right? Sometimes there is a reason. Sometimes it's not a good reason.
Right.
But without me knowing that, I can't apply a certain value to that, right?
Right.
There's also committee votes. Committee votes typically are not scored in my scorecard because those are not published online. They're in many cases voice votes in committee. Sometimes somebody will roll call a committee vote. I've had, I think in the 3 year, well, this will be the third year published, I think I've only actually scored a committee vote one time. And I don't even remember the topic, quite frankly, but it was such a big deal that it warranted that level of consideration. But typically, on my Facebook page, if there's a committee vote that gets roll called that I think is really important, I'll try to. You got to run up to the Capitol, get a copy of it, from the guys there, and then you can publish, what had happened, but that doesn't go into my scorecard as well.
Okay.
And I just brought that up because I read some of that, and Senator Takubo scored like an 80 some odd %, and I was frankly shocked.
Right.
And so then we had discussed some of the things. So if there's some results on there that are shocking to you as well, that might have some play.
So what does that say
right.
to someone that when you look at a score like that and you're shocked? I mean, what does that?
So I think what I would recommend is look at the scores in a relative fashion, right? Mm-hmm. Because, and I'll tell you again, just a little kind of preview for this year's report. The Senate was a mess. We'll just start with that.
Okay, yeah.
So it's going to be shocking from a perspective of how good everybody was. But the reason they were good was because there was so many bills the House sent over that just didn't even get voted on.
Didn't get touched.
And the Senate this year, primarily on the ones they did, were in lockstep primarily. So they all look alike coming out of the Senate.
Well, let's talk about some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty, the meat of this matter.
Sure.
Because this podcast goes really fast, you'll find.
I was just going to say the other thing is a uber useful tool.
Yes.
But you need to talk to people and you need to get involved.
That's right. That's right.
And it's going up to the legislature. It's not scary. It's a little nerve-wracking at first, but make that first step. Jump in with both feet.
Well, and Barry and I talked on the phone before, when I invited him on the podcast, and he's like, I really want to tell people how they can get involved. Like, it's not as hard as you think. If you really want results, there are things that you can do that are effective.
Sure.
So let's dive into the meat of the matter with some of the bills and the things that happened this legislative session.
Sure. So after we talked, I started thinking about it and said, okay, well, I've got some time. What's important, right? What's going to get to the meat of this? And I'll try to burn through some of these fast, but some of them I think we might take some time. So I picked out what I would call 5 bills that passed that we expected them to, a Republican supermajority, 5 bills that didn't pass that we all are shaking our head. Why didn't this pass in a Republican supermajority? And then 1 bill that passed that I think we'll sit down and go, what?
Does it have to do with milk?
No, that's actually, but that one did make my 5 list.
That's on the list. I saw
that one is on my list. We'll burn that one real quick. So
let's start with the one. Which ones do you want to start with? What do you think?
So we can just take them in any particular order. But so we'll start with the medically assisted suicide, euthanasia. Mm-hmm. That was an important bill that came up. It's joint resolution. It's going to be on the ballot in the fall for West Virginia to create a constitutional amendment that basically outlaws euthanasia in our state. So it's a very pro-life bill. Delegate McGeehan, again from Northern Panhandle, but he's usually pretty strong on my scorecard. He put together this, and it's a great piece of work. He gave a great speech on the House floor about it, and he tells a great story because he met someone in his area who was going to travel out west to do this.
Oh, wow.
And Delegate McGeehan decided to try to convince him maybe this isn't the thing to do, right? And so he went out west. And his story that Delegate McGeehan tells is he finds it's an industry.
Yeah.
It is an industry.
industry.
People pay money. You basically show up like a hotel room.
Oh, gosh.
They give you a cocktail. You pay them a certain amount of money. They give you a cocktail. They leave you in your room at night. They come back the next day, collect the body.
Oh.
And
that's hard.
And how long ago that we were persecuting the one man that was doing it?
Kevorkian, right.
Thank you, Ron.
That's heartbreaking.
I mean, that wasn't that long ago. I remember that.
It's like a hotel
It's only
death.
been since the 90s, since the 90s for the most part. Kevorkian was everywhere.
right.
It
wasn't that long ago.
That's just
when we
that's
hear
troubling.
that, we hear about that. It seems like Canada's doing a lot of
Horrible. They're pushing it actually for depression even.
But we don't think about it that it's coming here, right? Because it's not. Maybe it's not in West Virginia right now.
Yeah.
But it is in the United States.
Yes.
And that's the point of this. And so voters are going to have an opportunity to do that. So I think that's one that we expected them to put through.
Thank you.
And they pulled through with that one. So that was a good one.
Okay.
Well, we go ahead and take a break.
Well, we've got 5. He just told me 5.
Did you give it 5?
Yep.
Okay.
And that thing keeps
about his
squeaking
timing?
over there. For some reason, that mic is squeaking.
Okay, yeah. We'll just leave it as it.
Talk into it, Lisa. Okay.
Well, we can get through a couple quick ones then.
Yes, let's do. We've got
let's
5
do that
minutes.
before
Go
we get
ahead.
to the 5 minutes.
So we've got the Joint Resolution 28, protection from a medically assisted suicide. We got that. We expected that to pass.
The raw
Senate
milk.
bill.
Let's jump down to the raw milk.
Let's do
that's
it.
a quick one.
Okay.
HB 4911, raw milk. The current law would have required that you are as part of a herd sharing option where you own part of the cow for you to have raw milk, right?
Uh-huh.
So whether or not you like raw milk or whatever, that's kind of up to you. But the law would prohibit you from just simply going to your neighbor who has a cow and say, I'd like to buy some raw milk.
Yeah.
And so, we would expect from a conservative viewpoint and a little bit of a liberty stance that
free country.
If you want to go to your neighbor and buy raw milk, you should be able to do that.
Okay.
That bill has been trying to be pushed for a while. It finally got passed.
It's healthier too. The pasteurization
It is
kills
so
things
healthy. I was reading about it. I want raw milk.
Probiotics, is that what it kills?
So much. And then we've got the Senate Bill 280, which I think was interesting, allowing teachers in public schools to discuss scientific theories.
Right. And that one got a lot of controversy.
I would expect that.
As you can imagine.
I would expect that.
But actually, this is a great example of if you actually read the bill, it doesn't say what they say it says, right? And simply all it did was say, teachers, if a student asks you questions about how did the universe begin or how did life begin, or what about this, right? You have the freedom then to talk about different theories and in reality, what the objection to was, creationism.
Isn't scientific? Is that what they say?
Right.
Was that the argument?
That was the whole thing. Well, and then
it's a theory.
But then they wanted to say, well, that's religion. You don't be bringing religion into school. And it's like,
it's not like they're going out and publishing books all over and
well, and it's not.
They're just allowed to answer questions without being persecuted. I mean, there
Right.
is disciplinary action against teachers that mention.
That's right.
Right.
Creation.
Yes.
And Kayla Young, I just had to throw this in here. She threw in something about teaching flat Earth on that bill, and I was laughing.
Oh Lord.
Right.
Well,
and
that's not in the curriculum. I can tell
wisdom.
you that what's in the public schools curriculum, it says nothing about creation.
It's decriminalized.
Yeah, I mean, it just decriminalizes a teacher for discussing it if a student.
That's right. It protected the teacher is what it did.
Protects the teacher. That's right.
And protects the teacher from being able to actually answer questions or have conversation.
That's right.
without worrying about being, fired, terminated, prosecuted, whatever.
Because clearly over 70% of our state identifies as Christian.
Right. Newsflash.
Right.
Kayla. And then we've got, what else? Let's see.
HB 4880, the Social Security income tax.
Income tax.
That's, I will say, they've been year over year kind of taking away some of the taxation. And I think this is a good one that we expected them to do, right? Step forward, remove the state income tax on Social Security. It's going to be phased in over a few years, but that's one we expected them to do.
Yep.
And they got that one across the line.
And your Social Security is taxed before it's taken out, right? So this is like a double taxation they're just removing.
Thank you. All right, and then HB 4233, the non-binary, not permitted on birth certificates.
Right.
That's a no-brainer for a conservative legislature, right?
For a conservative, you would think. And that one actually passed in the House 93-5 with 2 absent, and through the Senate 33-1 with nobody absent. So that one passed with no problem. And again, basically it says on a birth certificate, it has to either say male or female. It can't say non-binary on a birth certificate.
Does it...
Because as a newborn, you know this. You know that you're non-gender.
do doctors do that? Do they say non-binary on birth certificate?
In other states.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually an option, I think, in California. It's like...
I always
say... You can put a lot of options in California.
An option for who?
For the parents to put that on the birth certificate.
Oh, Lord.
It's funny because I always say West Virginia is the last. We're the last to get everything. And sometimes that's a blessing.
Yeah.
For things like this. We're the last to have to deal with this nonsense.
Right. And we learn from other states and we say, oh, nope, we're not going to do that here. So let's preempt
Just
that.
head it off at the pass.
So let's do the middle one, and then we'll take a break and come back and talk about the ones that did not pass that we expected to pass.
All right. So the one in the middle that I was going to talk about it did pass, and that was the eliminate, it's the vaccine exemption. Mm-hmm. But I will say that it is horrifically watered down. There were a lot of versions that bounced back and forth between the House and the Senate, a lot of conversation about it. And in the end, just to be clear, because I will say I appreciate Delegate Kirby on the floor of the House. When that bill came up, he put in an amendment to provide religious exemptions. Mm-hmm. So if you have a deeply held religious belief that I don't want to take
Which that seems like a no-brainer to me.
Right.
Like, why
to take
not?
this vaccine, and I get it, right? Some vaccines were created using aborted fetal cells. Mm-hmm. And so, there is certainly a religious exemption logic there. Mm-hmm. And so Delegate Kirby put that in. And the funny thing is, and this is a great vote right here, on that amendment that Delegate Kirby put in, it only passed 58 to 37. 58 out of 100 said, yes, we want a religious exemption in West Virginia. Mm-hmm. Now, I just put a little bit of statistics around that. West Virginia is only one of 5 states in the country that does not have either a religious exemption or a personal belief exemption.
And all of our bordering states have them.
Yeah. And we're in company of like Maine, Connecticut, New York, and California. Those places are in alignment with West Virginia on this one. I think we're way out of alignment.
They hardly ever give medical exemptions either. Yeah. So it's not even an option to really get an exemption.
So,
in the end, though, the final bill, because then it went to the Senate, and the Senate made some changes, and it comes back. In the end, the final bill is if you're virtual school, you're exempt.
Yeah. And not playing in sports.
Not playing in sports, but if you play in an SSAC sporting thing, then you have to take the vaccine. And also private and parochial schools have the choice, right? It's not the parents' choice.
It's the school.
It's the school's choice whether or not they want to require that or not. So that's the end result of this. And that's why I say, you know what? We expected better.
Yes.
We'll take that one.
We'll take it.
But we expected better out of this, out of a super majority Republican.
And we are not done, right? We're not done with that one.
No, we're not done.
No. All right. And I feel like that's going to impact the public schools as well.
Yes.
Because people they're going to just start making decisions.
Yeah. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for the second scoop. Let's come back with a third and final scoop here with Barry Holstein and talk about some disappointments that happened this last legislative session, and then what you can do. Let's look to next year and what we can do to impact this. All right, so we'll be back in a minute.
The Scoop Squad Truth Pod would like to thank our sponsors. Those include Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, featuring auto, home, life, business, workers' compensation, and pet insurance. Pet insurance, you say? That's health insurance for your dogs or cats that covers special foods, illnesses, surgeries, and medication. They're on 16 Capitol Street in Charleston at 346-9181, or reach them at www.iigwv.com. Also by Jody's Mobile Services, offering steam cleaning, pressure washing, fleet washing, and auto detailing. We come to you. They're at 304-437-3164. And also by Eggplant on Bridge Road. Anything but ordinary. Go to eggplantshop.com. Also by T-Graphics on the west side, 312 Buchanan Street, 345-4816. Go to tgraphics.com for screen printing and embroidery since 1984. Again at 345-4816.
And we are back with a third scoop of the Scoop Squad Truth Pod. We're here with Elisa Payne. We are here. Ron's in the studio. I'm Ashley Switzer, and we've got Barry Holstein. And we are now going to talk about some disappointments, some heartbreakers. What do you want to talk about first, Barry?
Well, let's go easy. So one of them was we'll start easy, and then we'll just go. Okay. We'll go to the meat of it. But one of them was there was also another state constitutional amendment that was proposed to require U.S. citizenship to vote in the state of West Virginia, and that one in the end was filibustered by the Democrats. It was at the very end of the last of the House session that night, and they just ran out the clock. So there it goes. But that's one of them that we would expect a Republican supermajority to be able to get through quickly, easily.
Yeah.
And what was the number on that?
That is Joint Resolution 21.
Okay.
And the real issue there is if you look at the Constitution, it speaks a lot about being a resident and not a citizen.
Okay.
Right. So it uses a lot of language around residency, gives you certain privileges. Even so much, if we put in here that in the state of West Virginia, you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. Well, now that precludes, for example, let's say a county decides, we're a county and we want, for the county races, we want to be able to include non-citizens.
Okay. Illegal
immigrants, whatever we want. We want to be able to include that in a vote. And some states do that at the local level, right? Certainly not for, the U.S. Constitution governs the national elections, but they don't govern the lower elections. And that becomes part of the state. And that's why that one was important. But again, did not get across the finish line.
Though there was a borough, I think, in New York City that tried to do that, and they were shot down by the Supreme Court. So have faith, listeners. Have faith.
That one's probably not done either. Do you think?
I don't think that one's done.
No, that'll be back next year, Barry. Do you think? I mean,
yeah. I think that'll come back for sure.
I don't know that. I think it's just maybe the organization process,
right,
or how how the bills were given priority, and I think there's so many, what is it, 2,000 some bills, 2,800 bills, and
so many,
and only like 248 passed. So
right.
I think they start putting next year. They change the priority.
Right.
Do you want to save the worst for last? Because I feel like
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's jump down to this trafficking one.
Yes.
So there's actually two bills that came out of the House this year that were important to me, and I think for a lot of folks right now, and that's relative to human trafficking. So HB 4666 was a a step toward increasing the criminal penalties for human trafficking. And for example, it took certain penalties from 3 to 15 years, and then changed them to 15 to 40. Mm-hmm. But if you were trafficking a minor, it bumped it up to 25 to 100 years in prison. So these were important.
These are important.
Yeah,
protecting children.
That's right, and I think that's a theme on many of these that I'm bringing out today.
These, yes.
It's about protecting children, and that's a good one.
And literally, you can go online, put in this bill number, click on the bill number, and look at who voted against it. It has a roll call right there.
Yep.
Well, and the interesting thing about House Bill 4666, it passed the House unanimously.
Yeah. And
then it goes to the Senate. And you're going to hear this a lot in the next 10 minutes. And then it dies in Senate Judiciary. Senator Trump runs Senate Judiciary. He's not running for re-election. However, unfortunately, perhaps, he is unopposed for the next Supreme Court Justice of the state of West Virginia.
Oh, boy.
So that is where we stand on this, and that's why elections matter, and that's why this information matters.
It's very important.
So you can get ahead of this kind of stuff, right, and understand.
Yes.
House Bill 5031 was another trafficking one. It was relative to human smuggling, illegal aliens coming through our state, and prohibited that, and there was penalties for smuggling those who are in our country illegally into our state, or through our state for that matter. That one passed the House as well, 83-13, went to the Senate and sat in Senate Judiciary and didn't move. Those are two easy ones. You think, okay, trafficking, right? We want to protect children. We want to protect folks from this type of environment, because I think we're all becoming very aware of trafficking and what's happening in our country. And these should have been two gimmies in a supermajority Republican legislature, and they sat in Senate Judiciary.
And you can go online under Senate tab, look under committees, click Judiciary, and you can see exactly who's on there.
Yeah, and I'm going to post this on the Facebook page, just so you guys have a visual where you can go back and then punch it into the West Virginia Gov site. Okay, so let's save the worst. We save the worst for last.
Well, we have two. You want to jump into the removing obscenities?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that one, because we're on protecting children.
Yeah.
So House Bill 4654 was the bill to remove obscenities from our public schools, libraries, and museums. And that bill, indeed, again, passed the House, 85-12. We did have one Republican vote against that bill, and that was Delegate Joe Statler, who's also I think he's the vice chair of the House Education, interestingly enough.
Interesting.
He voted against that. But what that was a bill that basically said, currently in law, if you or I are out on the street and we provide obscene material to children, there's a penalty for that, right? We're going to get arrested. We're going to jail. We're going to pay a fine. We're going to do, whatever the infraction would suggest. However, in law, there's also about 25 years ago, there was an exemption put in for schools, for libraries, for museums. There was an exemption put in about 25 years ago.
I wonder if they could. Did they not foresee? Did they not?
I know, right? You would
forward
think.
thinking.
Well, and it was school curriculum, because they are.
That's right.
The library books really doesn't fall under this exemption. And I think initially it was probably health class where you're showing naked bodies, but they didn't have the forethought of.
Yeah, clearly not.
Right, but and I think on the floor of the House they did a great job.
Yeah.
Kind of explaining this bill in particular, because the first thing everybody wants to say is, well, what's obscene? What does that mean?
Right.
Oh no, it's in the code.
Yeah.
It's very well defined on what obscenities are.
It is defined.
And what there's some defenses, right? There are defenses that you can do. Mm-hmm. So, but obscene, and I think Delegate Steele provided the point here about prurient interests.
Yeah.
And this is the definition that's in our code. So this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. Material having a tendency to excite lustful thoughts, or defined as a shameful or morbid interest in nudity, sex, or excretion. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about, right? So when they say obscene materials, it's not, oh, well, you find this obscene, or I find that. No,
it's not subjective.
It's not subjective.
It's not that subjective, right? And it's clearly relative to creating this sexual desire or this sexual response and a sexual arousal.
Right.
Great, yeah.
And these are in our middle schools.
And that did not pass. Got through the House.
No, that also died in the Senate Judiciary.
Okay, it's becoming a thing.
So we got one big one left, right?
One big one.
Yeah, the Senate Bill 601, House Bill 5243, the West Virginia Women's Bill of Rights, which passed the House overwhelmingly down party lines, right? Did every Republican in the House vote for that?
So this bill is probably a great example of what I would say the mess of this session was, because it went back and forth. It started out really well, and I call it the "What is a Woman" bill.
Yeah,
because that's all it basically did. It defined.
It was misnamed.
Right.
It was misnamed.
It really. I feel like it was
the
too.
bill. Yeah, I'll go with that.
And the opponents capitalized on that.
Yes.
They did.
Yeah.
But in essence, all it did was define what's a male, what's a female, and that there are only two genders. Just summarizing it, right?
Yeah.
So, but in the House, there were a lot of amendments on the first pass. One amendment got put in there with Delegate Steele through some maneuvering, and he took out a piece of code that, in essence, it talks about sexual contact down in code, right? Mm-hmm. It defines sexual contact. But in the code, it would suggest that, if I touch you in a way that could be considered sexual, right? Mm-hmm. If you're my spouse, I can do that, right?
Right.
It doesn't say anything in that particular definition about whether it's wanted or unwanted. It just defines what sexual contact is. Mm-hmm. And he removed that piece about that if, we are married and I touch you or you touch me in that way, then that meets the definition and can then be cascaded up into other parts of the law and become a problem. So I think there was... So they did pass it out of House with that in it.
Okay.
With it like that, right?
And it also defined that sex did not include gender identity. Sex was man, sex was woman.
Right.
It did not include gender identity. And I think we need to state that because there's a lot of problems.
Well, and the story goes because when it gets over to the House,
3 minutes.
When it gets over to the Senate, coming out of Senate Judiciary, they decided to throw their own things on it, which did circle back to the federal law about that issue. And so they put the things that we were trying to get out of it kind of back in. It gets on the Senate floor. A senator puts forth an amendment that, kind of puts it back. Anyway, it went back and forth. They tried to resurrect it with Senate Bill 601 on the Senate side. They amended it, put the original language from the original House bill in the Senate side. But then at the last day, in essence, what I'll say is it just kind of got to the point where on both sides, they waited till the end.
Yeah.
And they let the Democrats jump in with a million amendments.
36.
I was going to say, who allowed that? Is that allowed to happen?
You have to let them in the amendment stage. You have to allow them to do the amendments, but that comes down to bill management. And when you have the bill ready, so you can do it early enough so you have time to deal with. You have
time to deal with all of that.
Well, and the other thing too is you can have someone explain the bill to you, the amendment, or they can make it read. So they were going to make them read all 36 amendments.
Gotcha.
So it just would have drawn it out exponentially.
So, but why was the Senate such a mess, Barry? And what can we do look into next year? What can a citizen do to prepare for next year?
All right. So in 1 minute.
I know. I told you it goes fast. We're going to have to have it back.
It becomes educate yourself, right? Use some tools that are out there available. But also, when legislative session's in, if these things matter to you, take some time, go down to the Capitol during session, and I would say probably stay on the House side. They tend to be a little more open to conversation. Just go talk to them. They are people.
Yeah.
And they like to hear what you think, right? And I know it sounds scary, but they are simply people who are elected to put there, and they want to hear what you got to say. And the more people that show up on their door telling them the same thing, the more likely they're going to start, they're going to listen.
And you can sit in committee meetings. Like, everything is open to the public. Yeah. You may not be able to speak in those or anything, but you can know what's going on. So you can ask your delegates, well, this is what was discussed in committee.
Right.
Here's the problem with it.
Right. So, Barry, how much time did you spend at the legislature, would you say, this past session?
A lot. I burn vacation days from work and kind of.
I was going to say, I'm a teacher, and so I don't get to be there. I mean, I was able to attend some of the committee meetings that were held on the weekends, but I can't get there during the week. So it's
I'm down here as much as I can during session.
Now I send my emails, and we're on a couple text threads together, and we put the word out to where we can all do our part and send emails to our legislators about bills that we care about.
And that's another great one. Even an email, you think that's not that effective. But
they respond. They reply.
Yeah.
They
and I'll tell you, I asked last year, there was the big thing about puberty blockers, right? I went over to the Senate and I said, how many emails do you get on this issue? Because I'm thinking it's like hundreds and hundreds, right? How many emails do you get on this issue? 40? Really? 40,
wow,
50,
really?
60? That's all they got, right? And so if you could flood them with 100,
that makes a
200
difference.
emails, it's going to hit their radar, right? Because that's what we're talking about.
Well, and so that's your call to action, really, out there, listeners.
Yeah, that's right.
That is your call to action.
And also know that the lobbyists are there every day.
Yep. Yes.
We have to give them a counter narrative, a counter opinion on what's going on these bills, because they get paid to be down there.
Well, and I think
you can send sample texts to your friends.
Yeah.
Simple emails. All they have to do is sign their name.
Tell them a personal story about how it impacts you personally. That's always very good.
We need to have you in before the legislature goes into session next January.
And we're going to be looking
kind of go through the process.
When is your new score, or when is your next scorecard coming out to rate this past session?
So I'm trying to get it published as quick as possible, because I realize that again, as I said, this is an election year, and this Republican primary is so important that I want to get it out there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and we'll help you distribute that.
We'll share it.
Because you're right. This is this is huge. The primary is huge. And, rewind this podcast and listen to what the advice that Barry gave at the beginning. Again, it's www.topsviews.com. And Barry, it has been a pleasure, First Sergeant and Mr. Tops.
Thank you very much. It's been very, very enlightening.
Very informative, very enlightening, and that's what we like to do here on the Scoop Squad podcast, is to inform our listeners.
Thanks for having me.
Give them the best information so they can make the best decisions.
That's right.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. We're going to see you next week for episode number 96. All right. Thanks. See you next week.
If you would like to tie your business with this popular podcast, you can contact me, Ron Hughes, to advertise at ron.hughes, ron.hughes, at wvradio.com, or you could call me at 304-342-8131. The Scoop Squad Truth Pod would like to thank our sponsors. Those include Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, featuring auto, home, life, business, workers' compensation, and pet insurance. Pet insurance, you say? That's health insurance for your dogs or cats that covers special foods, illnesses, surgeries, and medication. They're on 16 Capitol Street in Charleston at 346-9181, or reach them at www.iigwv.com. Also by Jody's Mobile Services, offering steam cleaning, pressure washing, fleet washing, and auto detailing. We come to you. They're at 304-437-3164. And also by Eggplant on Bridge Road. Anything but ordinary. Go to eggplantshop.com. Also by T-Graphics on the west side, 312 Buchanan Street, 345-4816. Go to tgraphics.com for screen printing and embroidery since 1984. Again, at 345-4816. Rebroadcast, retransmission, or transcription is not permissible without the expressed approval of Scoop Squad Truth Pod, Copyright 2024.